Everybody, I'm Katie Wright. I'm the president of HLAA California, and I'd like to welcome you to our second California focused virtual meeting. Although we seem to be coming to the end of the pandemic, yes, we at HLAA California intend to keep on going with our virtual meetings. It's been one of the blessings of the pandemic to get to know so many more Californians with hearing loss. The HLAA California Board of Trustees, we're privileged to be able to offer more information, education, support, and advocacy. Speaking of access, we are all very aware that communication access, more often than not, takes a back seat to every other equal access mandated by the ADA. Granted, hearing loss is complicated and communication access needs can vary, but there are basic things that we need to have in place. An example of this is Zoom captions. It took Zoom a year to get us automatic captions, even though other platforms did it almost right away. Churches, public meetings, banks, workplaces, all of us struggle with communication access. The only way this is going to change is if we speak up. There have been a few legislative items that have come up in California since I became involved with HLAA California. The board, chapter leaders, and our virtual committee members discussed these, and we decided that there's a real need to know how to advocate at the state level. This led to today's presentation.
Okay.
Before we introduce our speaker, I would like us to take a couple of minutes. Ann Thomas is going to go through just a few slides to be sure we're comfortable using Zoom. Ann, take it away.
Hi, everybody. You know, by this time, most of us are really pretty comfortable knowing how to use all the features of Zoom. But there still are new people who come on board and attend our meetings. And we want to make sure that everyone understands the options that are available to them using Zoom, because virtual meetings, as Katie just mentioned, aren't going away, and they're a godsend for us to be able to connect with people all over California and also the nation. So the things that we're going to address are captions, viewing a full transcript, the chat window, and we're going to ask you to raise your hand for Q&A. The way that you turn on the captions, you look at your toolbar at the bottom of your screen. It should look like this black image that you're looking at with all kinds of icons on it. Look for the CC icon that says live transcript, and a secondary window will open up. You need to click on show subtitles. So when I took this picture, I already had the captions running, so that's why it says hide on mine. If you would like to see a full transcript, which I personally find very valuable, because, you know, as a hard of hearing person, we are always uncertain about when we're going to hear and when we can't hear. Sometimes it may only be one word, and in the captions that are the ones that are typed on the screen, sometimes by the time that I realized, oh, I didn't quite get that, the captions are gone. So if I have the full transcript activated, it's on the side of my screen and you can scroll it. So I could scroll back just a few lines and catch what it was that I missed. If by some chance you'd like to have the transcript, the captions larger, you can also increase the size of the captions. The chat window. All of us like to socialize, say hello to our friends, just be with each other, which is something that's been so hard for us during the pandemic with face masks. The way that you can do that is through the chat window. It's in the menu bar at the bottom of your screen once again. If by some chance the chat window is not movable, there's a pop-out window that you can see, which is the little image right next to number 1. And if you click on the caret, which is the downward facing arrow, another window will open up and just select pop out. When you select pop out, you can move the chat window anywhere you want on the screen. We'd like to encourage you to think about moving the chat window obviously away from where the captioning window may be, but this has turned out to be not so problematic because Zoom now allows you to move the caption window anywhere you want. You can change the font size, and there are keyboard shortcuts. On a Mac, it's press Command, that's squiggly, which is the command symbol. If you want to make them bigger, it's plus. If you want to make them smaller, it's Command minus. On a PC, it's very similar, except you press a different keyboard key. You press Control plus to increase them, or Control minus to make them smaller. And pretty systemically, these keyboard shortcut commands work on multiple different programs on your computer. We'd like you to feel free to use the chat to say hello to your friends, ask a technical question. We'd like to ask that you identify yourself by either your chapter name or location if you're someplace else across the country. We'd like to know who's with us during our meetings. Obviously, in a meeting with lots of people, it's very difficult to call on people by just doing this because you can't see everybody. So we're asking that everybody use the raise the hand feature, which is now located in the toolbar in reactions. When you click on reactions, the last item that you will see there says raise hand. When you click on that, a hand shows up in your thumbnail, and also it shows up in the participants list. So those of us who are helping run this meeting, who are moderating behind the scenes, can easily see who's raised their hand, and it puts them in the right order. So hopefully the person who raised their hand first gets called on first, and then the subsequent order. A feature that is very, very helpful to all of us is this adjust the screen size. So as participants right now, you should be able to see the presentation window on the left and the image of the person talking on the right. So that thumbnail of the person talking can be made larger and smaller. And the way that you do that is, see the red circle on this slide here? In the middle of that red circle are some vertical lines that are running up and down. If you take your cursor over those two lines, you can drag the window on the right, which is the thumbnail, and that makes the two windows larger or smaller. So if you would like to have the person who is talking be larger so that it's easier for you to lip read, which all of us need, right? Then just drag that window and make it bigger. Last few things that I have to remind everybody about. If you're like me, when I get nervous or I get excited, I talk fast. And that makes it more difficult for all of us to lip read. It also makes it more difficult for the captioner to accurately caption. So as always, a reminder to myself and a reminder to all of you, please remember to speak a little bit slower. If by some chance you have an external microphone and you haven't connected it today, bring it out for future reference. People with normal hearing might not notice some people, the clarity issues when some people are talking with external microphones versus not. But for those of us with hearing loss, it's really de rigueur. We really need to do that. I'm using an external microphone called Blue, and it increases the clarity of what you're saying because we're reducing the sound to noise ratio. So now I'm going to turn it back to Katie. So here you go, Katie.
Thank you, Anne. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I realized in the last week that this has been such a busy week for HLAA. We've had Walk for Hearings, and we have the convention coming up, And I'm afraid that some of our notices about this meeting got buried under all of the email that we've been getting from HLAA. So I'm really happy that you're all here today. Regine Castle, wave your hand. We want to thank you for spearheading this presentation today. Without you, it wouldn't have happened. So Regine, would you now please introduce our speaker, Assembly Member Kevin Mullin, Speaker Pro Tem of the California Assembly. Unmute. Regine, unmute.
Sorry about that. Okay, thank you, Katie. My name is Regine Castle, and I'm past president of Peninsula Chapter in Redwood City and past vice president of HLAA California. But I'm also in the district of Assemblyman Kevin Mullin, a wonderful young man. I can say young man because I'm an old lady. So Kevin Mullin is Speaker Pro Tem of the California State Assembly and has represented San Mateo County since 2012. He was born and raised in San Mateo County and is the fourth generation Californian. His legislative priorities have focused on elections reform and democracy, housing and transportation, and clean energy. He has championed all vote by mail elections and was author of the landmark Disclose Act, so voters can easily see who is paying for political advertisements on TV and social media. He has been a mayor and councilman of South San Francisco, a small business owner, and television host and commentator. He graduated from Sarah High School and the University of San Francisco and has a master's degree from San Francisco State University. He studied leadership at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and has served as an aide to his political mentors, Congresswoman Jackie Speer, when he was a state legislator, and his father, former Assembly member Gene Mullin. Kevin and his wife Jessica live in South San Francisco with their twin boys, Liam and Landon, and rescue beetle Sunshine. Assembly Mullin has, like us, has a hearing loss. I present to you Assembly Member Kevin Mullin.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Regine. The best part of that is when you called me a young man. I turned 51 on Monday, I guess it was, June 15th, which happened to be the day that California reopened officially after the pandemic. And it's also our deadline for submitting a budget to the governor. And it also happened to be my birthday. So it was kind of a momentous day in my life. But thank you so much for the kind introduction, Regine. Great to see that we've got San Mateo County represented here on the call. And I have to tell you that I've already learned something here this morning. I had not figured out how to get the captions working on Zoom. So, and I'm on Zoom all the time. And I have to tell you, I struggle from time to time. I hope, by the way, that my microphone sounds okay. I use in-the-ear headphones, which I sort of crank up and I'm able to hear properly. And I've got this fancy looking microphone over here, which is an external mic and kind of an expensive one, but I haven't figured out how to hook it up yet. So I'm still working out the technology, believe it or not, after all this time using Zoom. But hopefully you can hear me okay and that everybody has these captions activated. And just a quick note that I wasn't planning to talk about at all, but I have been working internally in the legislature to improve our captioning for legislative hearings and our floor session. And as the Speaker Pro Tem, I preside over our floor sessions, but the technology that is being utilized is really imperfect. It's essentially taking the audio and turning it into words. And quite often, there's not great alignment between what is actually being said and the words you see on the screen. So I could tell already that the Zoom technology is better. So that's given me a reminder that we need to redouble our efforts in Sacramento. Everything is caption enabled, but we have to be refining the technology because people are getting their information across California online. We used to have the California channel. That has gone away, unfortunately. To my chagrin, the cable companies discontinued the California channel where you could watch our hearings. So everything is now online and digital, which is good, but the technology most certainly needs to be worked on. And my understanding is that there are improvements that are sort of in the pipeline. But just a side note on that, you have an advocate in Sacramento working on that particular issue. But thank you so much for the kind introduction, for the invitation. I know that we had a number of scheduling issues, and it took a while for all of us to get together here this morning. So it's great to be with you. I am Assemblymember Kevin Mullin. Regine did an incredible job of introducing me. My district, just to give you a sense of the geography, I represent San Mateo County in the Bay Area, and it's South San Francisco, my hometown, down to Redwood City, our county seat in San Mateo County, sort of the heart of Silicon Valley, and then over to our beautiful San Mateo County coastline, including the area where they have the Maverick surfing competition, if any of you have heard of that. That's a beautiful area of the coastline that I represent. So very excited to be with all of you. This is indeed an issue that is near and dear to my heart. My mother was hearing impaired, severely so, and as long as I remember, had worn hearing aids. I myself developed hearing loss in my 20s, and I'm almost positive it was genetic, but the fact that I was a mobile DJ in college with headphones pounding loud music, I'm sure did not help the situation. But I suspect that most of my hearing loss is genetic in nature, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I am all too familiar with the struggles that you all face every day. And somebody mentioned, I believe it was Kate, or perhaps I'm sorry, I think it might have been Kate, talked about the masks issue, and that has been really challenging in this pandemic because I didn't realize how much I'm a lip reader. Really, I rely on lip reading all the time. I didn't even realize to the extent that I rely on lip reading, and the mask wearing has been a particular challenge. Working in the state capitol, where there's lots of side conversations, and I'm sorry, I'm sweating a little bit. I'm not nervous. I'm in South San Francisco. Whenever it gets above like 65 degrees, I start to sweat. So we have a really warm day here, which is truly unusual in South San Francisco, if any of you are familiar with this part of the state. But the mask wearing has been very challenging, and that is evolving. Of course, I support the mask wearing. Now the CDC guidelines are evolving, and I see more and more folks, and it's refreshing to see people's faces once again. And really, it's a relief because I can sort of rely on that lip reading again in my day-to-day conversations. But I was informed that the basis here of our conversation is the legislative process, how a bill becomes a law. Some of this, for a number of you, might be pretty basic stuff. For some of you, it may be kind of new information. I wanted to start sort of from a pretty basic level to talk about the structure of the legislature, our season, if you will, when a good time presents itself to weigh in on legislation. So I know we have a PowerPoint presentation, and that text is very small right there, but I hope that you can can see that, but just a quick overview. Again, some of this may be old hat to a number of you, but the legislature consists of 80 assembly members. We all represent districts of about 465,000. That's the number. That number will change, however, because we've done the census and there's a redistricting process that is now happening where the size of the districts will change a little bit. And the configuration of our districts may change a little bit. We have something called the California Citizens Redistricting Commission. It's not controlled by politicians. It's independent appointed folks that draw the districts, regardless of where the incumbents like myself live. They are drawing those districts right now. That's not on the slide, but that's just kind of for your background, that the districts as they are currently configured are going to change for the 2022 election cycle. So 80 assembly members and 40 state senators. That is your legislature. We're, of course, elected by the voters to our respective districts. We make laws. The biggest thing we do, frankly, is pass the state budget. And we just passed a $270+ billion state budget. We are in the midst of negotiations with the governor. Even as we speak, we have to come to an agreement with the governor by July 1st, which is the beginning of our fiscal year. So that really is in terms of just the weight, how we handle taxpayer dollars. And I should say we're in a pretty extraordinary situation right now with a surplus, an unexpected budget surplus, which is really counterintuitive because we had an economy sort of come to a halt during the pandemic. But wealthy income earners in California and the stock market were very dependent on capital gains taxes. Those things continue to thrive even during a pandemic, which really hurt. The pandemic was really painful, obviously, for small business people and lower income service workers, for example. We have an affordability crisis here in the Bay Area. It's very expensive to live here in other parts of the state as well. So we do have this kind of bifurcated economy, but the folks at the top, the wealthier income earners, were doing very well, and they are responsible for a significant portion of our budget. So we're dealing with a budget surplus, which is a good problem to have, but it's actually a little bit of a complicating factor when people know that there's a lot of tax money sitting there. We are doing rebates. We're doing rebates for the taxpayers. We're sending money back to the taxpayers. We're building up our reserves, for example, and we're paying down debts, and we're saving a bunch of that money, but we're also going to spend a considerable amount of money as well in that surplus. So I won't get too detailed there, but just to give you a sense of, in terms of the calendar, that's really what we're dealing with right now is the state budget and your tax dollars. So I mentioned briefly that I'm the Speaker Pro Tem. I'm the #2 officer of the Assembly, and I preside over our floor sessions. Part of my job is to help facilitate debate and discussion on the Assembly floor. As you can imagine, sometimes the debate can get contentious, and it is my job to ensure civility among the parties. Sometimes you'll have conflicts within the Democratic caucus. It's not always Democrats versus Republicans, although I have to say, although Democrats are actually we are a supermajority of the body, we get along very well with our Republican colleagues. In terms of the leadership, I'm in the leadership for the Democrats. My leadership colleagues on the Republican side are really wonderful people, and we get along very well and have a good working relationship. But you wouldn't know that if you read the newspaper about all the conflict between the parties, and much of that generated from Washington, D.C., where there is quite a bit of rancor. We actually have a pretty good working relationship. I'm proud of that in Sacramento. But sometimes the debates on the floor can get rather intense. People feel very passionate about a particular issue. So I have to sort of navigate that. And I do parliamentary rulings in case there's a point of order For example, where somebody is questioning the validity of a particular topic that's introduced into debate, I have to make those kinds of rulings from the rostrum. But back to just kind of the nature of the legislature and our process. We are a full-time legislature, so we are working year-round, but there is a session calendar. The legislative session starts in December and usually wraps up in September. And during this time, members are usually in Sacramento 4 days a week. So, for example, I live in South San Francisco, but I drive back and forth. I commute essentially to the Capitol Monday through Thursdays. I try to get home in time to help put the boys down to bed. They're 3.5-year-old toddlers, so I'm on the road quite a bit. My colleagues from Southern California will fly up Monday and stay either at a hotel, or some have apartments in Sacramento, and they will fly home on Thursday afternoon. But that's we're in session roughly 7 months out of the year. So legislation, for your purposes of when to start tracking bills, legislation is introduced in December, January, and February. So the end of one year and the beginning of the next year is the period in which bills are introduced. And once they're introduced, they get assigned to policy committees that hear them. Some bills are in legislative language, we call them double referred. They cover topics that touch a couple of different issue areas. So sometimes they'll be double referred and have to be heard by 2 committees. But those are the policy committees, particular topics. And by the way, that is one of my twins banging on the window with a little baseball bat, a plastic bat, thankfully, and it's not breaking the window. So you may hear that from time to time. The policy committees will hear those bills, and it's during the committee process. That's a pretty important phase of this, because the bills will be amended based on feedback from various stakeholders. You'll want to weigh in pretty early in this process while the policy committees are doing their work and considering possible changes and amendments to bills. We will meet with various party stakeholders, such as other members, of course. I've got to work with our colleagues, but lobbyists, association members, supporters, those who oppose or support bills, and of course our constituency that I represent. I hear quite a bit from my constituents about bills, and we log all of that. And I'm aware of what my constituents are saying about legislation before I vote on anything. We have a system, and Kevin Fong, I should give a shout out to Kevin Fong, my legislative staffer in the district office. He is on this call, and he will tell you we get lots of calls, mostly emails now. I'm an old assembly staffer. I used to work for Jackie Spear. We would get lots of phone calls. Now, most of these communications are over email, and we log it. We capture all of that. We track it, and I'm aware of that before I vote on legislation. So if you want to get involved in that legislative process, this really is a good time to do it, not to necessarily wait. And I think some folks kind of make that mistake where they say, well, let's see what happens. Let's wait, see if it actually survives the process, and then we'll weigh in. Sometimes there's so much momentum around a bill, it's almost a little too late to weigh in. And some people will say, well, why didn't we hear from you early in the process? So it does help to be early to get your voice heard on particular bills. So you can certainly request a meeting with a member, myself. You can certainly request that directly, or staff. And as I mentioned, write, call, or email the office. So these are all effective ways to advocate for the issues you care about. And I should tell you, one of the things that sort of bothers me, sometimes you'll hear pundits or others talk about how, well, unless you're a contributor, like a campaign contributor, you're not going to be heard in the process. And I have to tell you, and this always really gets me, we have to be responsive to our constituency. If we are not, we run the risk of losing re-election. There's a sense that you're simply not doing the job. If you're sort of caught up in Sacramento and just talking with lobbyists or just focused on fundraising, you're not doing the job properly. And almost to a person, I have to say, my colleagues are responsive to their district and are responsive. And the suggestion that we just listen to campaign contributors is always very insulting. So I just thought I'd throw that out there since it just sort of triggered it. I just thinking about that. We have to be responsive to everybody that's communicating to our office. Otherwise, we're not doing our job. So if a bill makes it through that committee process that I was sort of describing, and if it's got a fiscal angle, it will go through what we call the Appropriations Committee. And that's where a bunch of bills go to die because we simply can't pay for them, or they cost too much money to the state treasury, or they're simply not workable bills. And the Appropriations Committee is where lots of bills go to die. But if they survive that process, they will come to the assembly floor for a full vote. Most bills are a 41 vote threshold in an 80-member assembly, a simple majority. But there are some measures, if they have an urgency clause, if the bills are to take effect immediately, if they're signed by the governor, it requires a 2/3 vote. And if there's a fiscal component to it, it can take a 2/3 vote. And there are other measures, for example, constitutional amendments, and I will occasionally introduce constitutional amendments that, if passed, will eventually go to the voters of California to vote on. That also requires a 2/3 vote. So, in fact, there's a breakdown right there of those different thresholds. So, if you make it sort of through that process, it will go over to the Senate, and it sort of starts over in terms of the process, the policy committee process, then the fiscal committee, if there's a fiscal aspect, and then to the Senate floor, where most bills, it's a 21 vote threshold to pass, and then on to the governor for the governor's consideration. And the governor can certainly sign a bill into law. He can veto a bill as well. If the governor vetoes a bill, the legislature can override the veto with a 2/3 vote, but that almost never happens. I haven't seen it in my 8 years. And I think I want to say the last time that happened was like in the late 70s or something. It's just not, it really is a very, very unusual circumstance where the legislature would override a gubernatorial veto. But there actually was a little bit of a discussion around it, I do recall, when Governor Brown vetoed a particular piece of legislation, the topic of which is escaping me in the moment. But we had a brief discussion and decided it might just make the governor angry, and nobody wants the governor too angry at you. So human nature, I think, took over on that one, and we thought better of it. But if you would like to track bills, the progress, the website has been improved. It's a long URL, I guess it is, right? It's a long URL, leginfo.legislature.ca.gov. And we have been working to improve the functionality of that website. But you can track by particular issues that you're interested in. If you follow certainly the work of a particular author, a particular member. So I would suggest, if you are interested, perusing that website. We have done some good work to make it a little more usable than it has been. So as I mentioned, we have a full-time legislature. So in the fall, when my colleagues and I are not in session, we are back in the district. I'm anticipating this fall, for example, we're going to be sort of back in business in terms of in-person meetings. I do love the fact that Zoom is available, because I think we're going to be kind of in a hybrid mode where a number of meetings happen like the one we have this morning. There will be a number of meetings in person. Our office will be open where I'll be meeting with constituents and interest groups. And I think we'll start to see some in-person breakfasts and lunch, the Rotary clubs of the world, those kinds of things. I think we'll start to see some of that in person again. But it's an opportunity for us to kind of really reconnect in earnest with our district and just spend a lot of quality time at home in the district, attending events, hosting events, and so forth. Members are typically back in the district from September to November. And then we start up the session again in December. We're usually home for the holidays. We're not doing much work, candidly. In the middle to the end of December, we're home for the most part with our families in the district, even though the session has officially started. For the most part, we're home around the holidays. So that was a very high level overview of the legislature. I hope it gives you a better understanding of just sort of the basics of the work that my colleagues and I do. But before I close, and I hope I'm not going too long on time here, but I wanted to, and I'm going to need my reading glasses for this. I wanted to let you know that it may not always seem like it, but my colleagues and I hear the concerns of the deaf and hard of hearing community. My colleague, Dr. Bill Quirk from Hayward, wears hearing aids. We call ourselves the unofficial hearing aid caucus. At this time, we are the only two that are hearing aid wearers that I'm aware of. There may be more, and there may be some. We have some new senators, and I am not sure if they are going to join that hearing aid caucus. But I wanted to just touch on a couple of bills, if I can, if you'll allow me. I want to plug a bill that I'm working on, which is AB 435, Assembly Bill 435, which requires any hearing aid dispenser and any licensed dispensing audiologist to provide a written notice to a consumer before they purchase a hearing aid that uses proprietary or locked programming software. So the written notice is to inform the consumers like you and I that a hearing aid can only be serviced or programmed at a specific facility or location. So this is a pro-consumer bill, just kind of alerting you, warning you that if you purchase this device, it can only be serviced at a particular location. So this will allow consumers to make an informed decision before making a hearing aid purchase. And I have Starkey hearing aids. Starkey is my kind of go-to brand. These little guys, I was probably like you, stunned at how expensive these hearing aids were. And I'm always stunned that hearing aids aren't fully covered by insurance. I'm a Kaiser member. I think I get a $1,000, basically a contribution to the purchase of these, but these cost about $4,500. So these are, very, very expensive devices. I don't need to tell all of you, right? So we want to make sure that there is enough notice for consumers before they make purchase about what you can do, what you're able to do or not do when it comes to getting those devices serviced. There was also, and by the way, that bill is currently over in the Senate, so it is making some progress. Hopefully we'll get that to the governor. And co-author of the bill, I'm a co-author of AB 598 by Richard Bloom, which would have established the Let California Kids Hear Act, which would have required a health plan or a health insurance to include coverage for hearing aids for an enrollee or insured under 18 years of age. Now, I think it should be across all age groups, but to actually try to get that bill through, we focused it on those 18 and under. This would have ensured all California children, regardless of income, would have had health insurance coverage for hearing aids. Unfortunately, that bill died in the process. We weren't able to get that. And I don't know all the ins and outs of that because I wasn't the lead author. My colleague Richard Bloom was, but there was resistance, I'm sure, from the insurance companies who didn't want to expand that kind of coverage. And then just briefly, I'll touch on one final bill, AB 322, which was my bill, which would have required the Department of Social Services to provide services to the deaf and hard of hearing individuals who reside in linguistically isolated households. So this addressed the needs of the deaf and hard of hearing living in immigrant households. Unfortunately, that bill died in the Senate as well. So as you can see, while there have been bills introduced, there's still much more work left to be done on behalf of the deaf and hard of hearing community. We did get our text to 911 bill, Kevin, correct me, but we had a text to 911 measure that became law. Essentially, San Mateo County already does this, but for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, if you have an emergency, you could send a text to 911 and get response from the 911 system. There were a handful of counties that already did that. My legislation, which became law, made that mandatory across the state of California. And we hope that that will actually potentially save some lives. So that is just a quick overview on the kinds of things that we work on. And I really, with that, welcome any questions, any thoughts, any ways to strengthen the accessibility of the legislature to your particular needs and interests, because I like to think of myself as a conduit around hard of hearing, hearing loss issues to that building and how we operate. So feel free to give me input and I'll carry it back to my colleagues, and welcome an ongoing partnership and association with your organization. So thank you very much for the opportunity this morning.
Thank you very, very much. This was fantastic. Fantastic. It's so neat to have, we can all research how to do this, but to hear it from somebody who's there and really knows the ins and outs of what's happening, fantastic insight. I'm sure that we have a lot of questions. Nancy Link Ellis, you're going to run the Q&A. May I remind you all that if you have a question, please go down to reactions in the bottom bar and raise your hand down there. And Nancy, go ahead and take away the Q&A.
Okay, Lynn Kinsey had a question. Please unmute yourself, Lynn. Lynn Kinsey.
Okay, yes, you mentioned about corresponding with your constituents and representing them and listening to their opinions. I was wondering, when a bill is authored by somebody that's not your representative, do they have to listen to you, or do they only listen to their people in their district?
That is a great question. And they have to listen to them. If they're doing their job like they should do their job, you listen to everybody who's communicating. And we have an incredible staff, right? I have a wonderful state capitol staff, a legislative staff, 5 people up there. I have 5 people in my district office who are incredible workers, in touch with what's going on in the district. They are the ones that really help me kind of collate all of the input. And we hear from people not only in my district, but from across the state of California. And an effective way, though, just sort of flipping the question just a little bit, an effective way to lobby other members is to identify advocates in that particular district. So I would say, you're trying to get a bill through, you're advocating for a bill. You can certainly communicate to your representative, but if you're really savvy and you look at the committee structure, for example, like, hey, we're going to need to get some support in this on the health committee for a bill. If you look at that roster and then you try to identify supporters of the bill, advocates like yourself in that particular district, and encourage them to communicate to their legislator, that will really get to that legislator, and they will realize, hey, this bill that I'm looking at in committee that I'm voting up or down on, I'm hearing from 20 hard of hearing folks in my district. They really want to see me vote for this, and they're watching what I'm doing. They're paying attention to what I'm doing. And that's where you can really be effective. And when you're talking about building sort of a statewide advocacy network, identifying advocates in particular districts across the state, that can be very, very effective. So in short, members will listen to whoever communicates with them, but they particularly are attuned to what their constituents are communicating to them.
Because there are some times when I have tried to email comments to a particular person and I'm told that because I'm not in that district, I can't write to them.
So can I make a comment about that, Lynn? So where that comes into play is if you have what we call a constituent issue. So if you have an issue, you're dealing with a state agency. So you're not advocating about a particular bill or just kind of offering your opinion. But if you have a constituent issue, you're dealing with the EDD or the DMV, you do need to be communicating with your representative because they have a staff that will work that issue. They will call the agency. They will try to deal with the bureaucracy. So in that respect, you may get referred to your representative, but there's nothing prohibiting you from communicating your opinion to any member of the legislature when it comes to bills that we're all considering. So they should be accepting your comment and maybe in a polite way, just alerting you, we'll certainly take that comment in, but you should also communicate to your particular legislative representatives since they represent you. But again, those constituent matters may get referred to your senator or your assembly member. So there's just a little bit of a distinction there.
Okay. Connie Lockhart, you're next. Would you please unmute yourself?
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Kevin. It's so nice to meet you. I'm actually the chairman of the hearing loss down here in City of Orange in Southern California. So it's nice to be with you and get your input on stuff. One of the things that came up in one of our past meetings that, I kind of like the biggest bang for my buck. So when you have a bill that you're working on for the fine print in that form that you can't get those proprietary hearing aids programmed just anywhere, what's the point of doing that in California only when that company is nationwide? And so how does that really, doesn't that just narrow it to California and these other people don't have that ability? That's my question.
That's a great question, Connie. That's a great question. So, and I probably don't have a great answer for it, but let me try to explain a little bit. I mean, certainly, as a state legislator, I'm not able to introduce legislation that would be federal in nature that affects all the states and would affect interstate commerce. The hope, though, is that if we're making policy in California with 40 million people, that we represent such a significant share of the marketplace that it can actually drive a corporate policy in a particular direction that may wind up affecting how they approach consumers across the country. I mean, 1 in 8 Americans lives in California, so we are a significant player, if you will, in the policy game. That being said, if we were to introduce legislation that really got into the interstate commerce world, it could certainly be challenged in court that we have overstepped our boundaries in terms of state policy. But generally, the Legislative Council, and this is one little element I didn't include there, but Legislative Council, the attorneys for the legislature, are the ones that will actually put pen to paper and draft the legislation. And they will be very mindful of, hey, we don't want to put something into law that is just going to simply trigger a challenge in court. So we'll structure it in a way that it affects California consumers, and we're sort of on the right side of the law, so to speak, in terms of any kind of a judicial challenge. But it may wind up having a ripple effect in terms of policy across the country. So I hope I kind of answered the question, but it is there definitely is some gray area, Connie, whenever we're doing this, when you're talking about national companies. I mean, that comes into play we're talking about plastics regulation in California. And these are huge multinational corporations, but California is a major marketplace for plastics in products. So if we do big environmental policy, it actually may have a effect not only nationally, but in some cases globally, if you do it the right way, and it's a landmark kind of a policy. And you see also some tension between like the automakers. When we set our clean air rules in California, you've got national automakers that sort of have to work with the California marketplace just because we have so many consumers in a state like California. So it is a very interesting question, and it's one that we actually sort of grapple with and have to deal with on a regular basis.
Okay, because it's just interesting to think you guys doing all this work, and then why can't we just go straight to the CEOs of these companies and say, can't you just add this in your form? Or we're going to have to push it, you know? But I guess we always have to push.
We always have to push. And I just to that point, Connie, and I know there are other questions here, but often we will introduce legislation as a way to create a conversation with industry, where we will occasionally pull a bill back if the industry is saying, you know what, forget the legislation, we're going to be doing this anyway, we think it's good policy. But legislation can actually prompt a conversation with the corporate sector on how they treat consumers.
Okay, I appreciate your answer. That was very interesting too and helpful.
Alan Cassura, you're the next question.
Okay, yeah. I have a comment, first of all, on what I think it was Lynn was saying about going to not be able to contact a person, the congressperson or assembly person. And I found that when you go to their website and you click on it and you try to put something in that you're not in the district, you do get that message. So if she wanted to actually contact that person, she's going to have to find a workaround, which may include maybe going to the legislature website and getting other contact information from there.
So can I comment on that? And I'm gonna if Kevin is still on the call, if Kevin Fong is on the call,
sure.
If he weighs in on this, that it's my understanding that there will still be a communication that goes through, but the message is suggesting that you contact your representative. But Kev, do you have, and that's been my understanding, so maybe I've learned something else here this morning, and if that's the case, we may have to work on changing that. But is Kevin still on the call?
I am indeed. I'm still here.
So talk to me about, so Kev, the question is about when you're just communicating. My understanding is that still went through, it still goes through, but suggests that you communicate with your assembly representative, because I mean, I know informally I hear from people all over the state of California, but in terms of the computer system and the email system run by the assembly, can you describe how that works exactly, Kev?
Yeah, if we're talking about the assembly member, and I can't speak for Congress, but if we're talking about the assembly member's website, each member's website will have a contact the member tab. And if you're using that, my understanding is yes, unless you're in the district with a valid address in the district, that message won't get through. That being said, we've also had constituents who just use the assembly member's district office address as the address that that they fill out. And if you do that, then that comment comes through to us. It doesn't have to be the assembly member's address, as long as the submission you're filling out has a valid address in the district. Any valid address in the district, that will come through to the office via our what we call our legislative constituent management system. Alternatively, folks, we've had folks from outside of the district write in a hard copy letter and mail that to the office as a way to contact us. Other folks will call into the office as well, saying they're from outside the district, but we're concerned about a bill that the assembly member was carrying or another issue that we were working on, as an example as well. And so there are sort of workarounds, if you will, to that.
Okay.
Thank you. Katie Wright, you're next.
I'm thinking of my role as HLAA California president. And when we want to let people throughout California know that there's a piece of legislation that they might want to advocate for, you're saying that contacting committee members is really important, and to contact their particular committee person is also important. So I'm wondering, is it worth our time then to research for people, because people aren't going to do this on their own, to, when I send out an email blast, to put the names of the committee members in there and tell people, find out if this person is one of your people and then contact them directly? Should I put email addresses in there? One of the questions came up is, I want to advocate this, but I don't know how to do it. And I want to be very clear to our people about how to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So a knowledge of who the committee members are, and then making the connection between where the committee members' district is and where your statewide advocates reside, and then putting the email in there so that local constituent who's a hearing loss advocate can communicate with their member. Now, it's quite possible, right, that you may not even have a person that lives in that district for that member who sits on that committee who's going to be hearing that particular bill. It actually requires quite a bit of work, actually. I mean, it sounds sort of simple, but you got to do the research. Okay, this bill is going to this committee. Who's on the committee? Where are they from? And do we have any constituents that live in that are advocates that live in those particular districts? But that is really effective if you can get to that level of refinement, as opposed to doing more of a blanket kind of a letter. If you can get specific and have these members on those committees hearing from their constituents that those constituents want their vote on that bill, they have to listen. Doesn't mean they're going to vote that way, but it makes it hard to not vote that way when they're hearing from their constituents who are following their actions. And an email address is great. Really, really effective statewide advocacy organizations will have ways to communicate with district level constituents, targeting particular members that sit on the key committees. Now, I get communicated to about bills all the time, but I tell people, I don't sit on that committee. The only time I'll see this bill is when it comes to the assembly floor. Now, it's still useful to talk to me because I may indeed be voting on that bill someday. But the committee process is so important in terms of bills surviving the legislative process. So if you can kind of get granular with the committee membership and connect it to the local constituents, that's where you're super effective, my opinion is, if you can get to that. But yeah, that requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of research and tracking and communicating. So it's no small task, let's put it that way. But you want to make it easy for folks to get one email from you and say, hey, just click this, send that email to your senator and tell them to vote for Kevin Mullin's bill when it comes to your committee.
Thank you.
Sharon Swerdlow, you're next. Unmute yourself, please. Sharon?
Sorry. Kevin, thank you very much for coming and speaking with us. This is very eye-opening for me. I'm Sharon Swerdlow. I'm the president of the Los Angeles chapter of HLAA, and advocacy is an area that we're definitely looking to get more involved in. So this is fascinating. I guess my question is sort of two parts with regards to like a length of time, if there's an average length of time that some of these bills take from start to finish. I've heard about the locked hearing aid bill for some time. So I'm wondering if, there's a wide range or a short range. And also if a bill gets killed, if, it's something that could then be repackaged at some point in the future, and how sort of that process works. I assume if committee members change or what have you. So if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, great question, Sharon. And I probably should have covered some of that detail. So bills, we have 2-year sessions, first year, second year. So we are now in, my goodness, the years are running together in this pandemic here. So this is 2021. We are in the first year of a 2-year session. So the bills, and we actually had a suggestion that we limit the number of bills. That's something I advocate for. I think we ought to be limiting the number of bills and really focusing our energies around what we believe are really necessary pieces of legislation, but topic for another day. The bills get introduced in the first year, and they either survive or die. For the most part, most of the bills sort of go by the wayside, but a number of bills will make it through the process. If a bill is held in the first year, you can revive it in the second year. It's what is called a 2-year bill. And we have a number of those actually right now where we've introduced it. It doesn't have the requisite level of support to continue to move it. So we will hold it essentially and make it what we call a 2-year bill. Now, it may or may not be revived the second year, depending on the nature of the kinds of conversations we have with stakeholders and others who may have been opposing the bill. So there's the 2-year bill process. Occasionally, and this is like really like legislative inside baseball here, kind of mind numbing, but there will occasionally be bills that get inserted into other bills, what we call a gut and amend process. So we're actually taking language out of a particular bill that's moved over to the Senate, say, and changing the topic of that bill entirely. But we put it in that bill because that bill has, that shell, if you will, has moved further along. So there are different ways that we can manipulate the legislative process. If, for example, just procedurally, there's a topic that needs action where the bill that dealt with that topic died or didn't move, but there's a vehicle in the next house, the other house, where we can insert the language because there's now an urgent situation and we need to act. We still need to find a way to move the language in a vehicle to get it through one house, back to the other house for concurrence, and then on to the governor. So those are the little unusual circumstances, but though there are occasionally examples where we need to act, but we also need to sort of stay within the rules of how the legislature works and how bills move through the process. And we get rule waivers, and no bill will get to the governor without both houses hearing it and voting on it. There's still that, but there are ways to manipulate, for lack of a better word, the process to get legislation through both houses. But the 2-year bill process is most common, where a bill won't move. They'll say it's a 2-year bill. Now, in the second year of a 2-year session, if you try to move a bill and there's no support, it's dead. That bill's dead for the year. Or the appropriations process, I talked a little bit about that. Bills will often die in the appropriations committee before they get to the floor. Those are big hurdles to clear because of cost issues mostly. That's where many bills will die. But when you contact the offices, the staff should give you a pretty accurate reading on what is the what are the chances that a particular bill will be moving forward in the process, and where should we be sort of applying our energy. And sometimes we have folks advocating for bills that I personally know, hey, that bill's not going anywhere. They're going to have to come back next year, really, and advocate for the bill in a more timely manner. So there's no quick and easy answer on that one, Sharon. It can be a complicated process with lots of nuances, and I'll be candid. I'm the speaker pro tem, and there are moments that happen, things that happen in Sacramento that I've never seen before, that I need to sort of figure out from a procedural standpoint about ways that bills can survive the process and also be, in some cases, resuscitated, depending on the nature of the issue. So I hope that answered your question. A very wordy answer, but it's a complicated, nuanced process up there.
Okay, Cheryl Farzoli, please unmute yourself.
Hello, I'm Sherry Pirzoli, and I'm the president of the Washington State Association. And I just wanted to chime in here and say how wonderful this presentation is. And I really enjoyed kind of meeting you, Assemblymember Mullin, and putting a very charismatic face and personality to your name. So I don't want to take too much time because we are Washington versus California, and I know that there are folks here who have direct questions. But I wanted to reassure everyone on this call that advocating for hearing loss is very much a team sport, and that there is a role for every single one of you here on this call today. And whether you're the person that sits behind the computer and sends an email to every one of the committee members, or if you're the person who contacts your particular legislator, if there's a role for every single person. And I just wanted to kind of say, get back on here and let you all know that there's a place for each of you. And what we found has been really successful in my personal district is the 45th district in Washington. We're really lucky because I have a representative on the Appropriations Committee. I have a representative on the Social Services Committees. And then I have a representative on the Legal Committees. So it's really great because we were able to kind of dovetail into all of these committees. So I would just say, contact your legislators, look at their websites, what bills are important to them, sign up for their newsletters, get to know them right away so that they know who you are when you write to them. They can put a face with your email. And then the way that for us in Washington, most of our bills have taken at least 2 years to pass. And then with the children's hearing aid legislation, the way we got that through this year, we didn't get the bill passed, but we got a $75,000 budget proviso for the insurance company to cover for the state to cover what the cost might be to the state. So there's different ways to go about it, and I think that that's what you've said, is try to look for different angles. If you don't succeed, the traditional path is just keep on trying, and there's a role for everyone. So thanks again.
Okay, Diane Gross, unmute yourself, please.
Did I get it? Yes, I think I got it. Hello, good morning. I just have a general question for Kevin. Thank you for being here. But I'm just curious about how the pandemic affected the work of the California legislature. Did it slow things down? Were you still able to get things done?
Great question. And we had a tough time. I'll be candid with all of you. I think I underestimated the importance, frankly, of in-person communication. We were able to certainly continue meeting, for example, not formally on the floor of the assembly, but in terms of staff meetings and so forth, using Zoom and technology. But politics, governing, It's a relationships business. It's very much relationship driven, and it was hard to maintain the kinds of connections with your colleagues. It was very difficult. We had I would say a relatively unproductive session. I don't know that I would say this publicly, but I know that we did not accomplish what we had hoped to accomplish. And much of that was pandemic related, in that we were not able to meet on a regular basis. We had all sorts of protocols, as you know, when we did appear on the floor, but there were large blocks of time where we simply weren't meeting as a full assembly on the floor. And we were not able to move legislation like we normally do. I think we were really affected in a negative way by the pandemic, as many of our constituents were, of course, particularly the small business folks and the restaurateurs and so forth. But we were able to provide relief. We passed the budget. We got some of the fundamentals done in terms of pushing assistance out to those most affected. And there was a lot of federal money coming through that we were able to push out the door. But I'll give you one example, just, and this was not the legislature, but the EDD, the unemployment department, it's just been an unmitigated disaster in terms of how they simply were not equipped to deal with the volume of claims that came through. There was federal money that was coming through that had to be passed through to our constituents. So it's more of an executive agency problem than a legislature problem. But I will just tell you, we had big issues like affordable housing that we simply did not produce solutions to the scale of the problems during the pandemic. But we were able to manage as best we could. And I know I was personally busier than I've ever been, because every day you were dealing with a crisis situation. And there were the volume of calls back and forth, trying to get our hands around getting assistance to our constituents. It was a super intense year. And there was a lot of good that was done, but in terms of policy and the way the state capitol works, it was unproductive in that respect. And it was very hard to deal with. We are coming out of that now. And we also ceded a lot of ground, if you will, to the governor, Governor Newsom, who I know very well and get along with. We actually ceded a lot of power to the governor through his executive orders. And he was really, of course, his administration was on the front line of dealing with this pandemic, but we didn't necessarily, we weren't structured in a way that we could offer counterbalance to the governor. And that was really unique, I think, to dealing with a once in 100-year global pandemic. I don't think anybody was really fully prepared to deal with everything that came our way. So, candid answer, hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Just one thing is that I'm a native Californian, and from what I see going on in the rest of the country, I am so glad to be here. And I'm very thankful for being in a state where the legislature has some bipartisanship. I appreciate that a lot. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay, we only have time for one more question, and that's for Regine. So can you please unmute yourself? Regine?
First of all, I want to say thank you so much, Kevin. That presentation was so complete. I mean, I think we learned an awful lot by what you had to say. But I just want to second what Sherry said. You know, so many people say we're the silent disability, but we're the third largest disability. So we should be able to pass so many laws that help us. And I think we should all listen to Ann Thomas when she said that we should all advocate for ourselves. When there's something that we can do to tell someone to do something to help us, I think we should always do that. So now what we need to do is when it opens up and the politicians have public events, they have coffees and breakfasts, or go on their website and find it and get to know your representative and get so they know you. So when we offer these bills, you can go and make yourself available to answer the questions and push the bills back. So we can't be the silent disability anymore. We have to be advocating and pushing and getting these things done. So that's my my point, or whatever you want to say. That's enough. Bye.
I second that. I second that motion, Regine.
That's all the time for questions that we have. I'm sure we have many, many more. Kevin, your dedication and your time that you gave to us today was fantastic. I know you're a busy person and you're probably very protective of your time with your young family, and you want to go out and see if any windows have been broken by plastic bats. So we are so grateful that you came and talked to us. And maybe if there's more legislation that comes up and we have questions, we can contact you directly, and maybe you can come back and talk to us sometime. That would be fantastic.
I would love it. I really enjoyed this. And like I said, this is personal to me. I have a personal connection, frankly, to each and every one of you, because I know what, at least to some extent, what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, and it's meaningful to me. So you have an advocate, and I've got another 3 years in Sacramento before I'm term limited out, but I'll work to make sure I pass the baton to somebody who will keep carrying these issues forward. But also, I would love to visit you all again and give you an update on what's happening.
Can I add you to our HLAA California mailing list?
Of course, absolutely.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
Great. All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Bye, Kevin. Okay, everybody, we have a few minutes left. We do intend to keep going with our meetings. Anne, can you go to the next slide and we'll talk about the convention? I want you guys to know that the HLAA virtual convention is next weekend, actually starting on Thursday. It's not expensive to register. Go to the website, take a look at the keynote speakers, the workshops, the symposium, and sign up and go to it. It's not a lot of time for you to have to dedicate to it, but what I did is I went and I put the things I want to see on my calendar, and I had to change it to Pacific time. Bugs me when they only put Eastern time. So remember that all of the times for the events on the convention are Eastern time. What else do I want to remind you to join or renew your HLAA membership. Oh, I should have suggested that to Mr. Mullin, that he join HLAA. Darn it, I missed an opportunity. Go to the website, the California HLAA California website, and click on membership, and you can join HLAA that way. I always remember that we may not like to think of hearing loss as our disability, and some people really rebel against the idea, the concept that hearing loss is a disability, but we still need communication access. We need communication access for everything. One thing that's going through right now is Kaiser, where they're doing all sorts of telehealth, and there are no captions provided for their telehealth appointments. I personally have run into this. And if it wasn't for Chrome having captions built in, I wouldn't be able to understand everything on my telehealth appointments. Everywhere, we need communication access, and we need to advocate for this absolutely everywhere. Next slide.
Can I make a comment here?
Yes, please do.
So across the board in California, none of our healthcare systems are on a regular basis providing communication access for people when it's requested. So first of all, you have to request it. So then when you don't get it, everybody's sending you follow-up emails about your service. Are you happy with your service? Because they're concerned about patient services. Then in that email message, you need to give them a bad rating on all of the things they're talking about because you couldn't understand them because they didn't provide communication access for you. So those of you who know me here know that I have just, in the last 6 months, I've had 2 cochlear implants. I'm very actively engaged with UCSF, possibly my local John Muir because they're connected, to deal with this terrible, I mean, it's a shameful situation. So if we do not provide them with the feedback about how unhappy we are, they're not going to do anything. And it's my understanding that when they get bad responses from their patients, that the information from that reflects on their scoring that they get from the Joint Commissions. So it hurts them where it matters because everybody wants to be listed as a hospital system. So Katie, can I take the last couple? I think there's just 2 more slides.
Yeah, we're running short on time, so be aware of that.
Oh, 1 more slide and we're good here. So we'd like to thank our captioner, Joe Gale. And for all of us look for captioners all the time, and we've put Gail's contact information here. And today, it's my understanding Gail lives in Florida. So this was an example that you can use a CART provider anywhere in the United States for a Zoom meeting like what we've done today. So please put Gail's name down on your list when you are looking for CART providers to provide services for you. We'd like to remind you that HLA California has a website, and it's been in the remodeling, reinventing itself stage for a while. And we're hoping, all of us are hoping that within the next 2 months that the new page is launched. So Katie will keep you posted about that. And if you have any additional questions, just send your questions to info@hearinglosscalifornia.org. So back to you, Katie.
All right, I think we're finished. Sally, you have your hand up. Is it a very, very quick question?
Yes, I would like to say one thing about doctor's appointments. You can ask your doctor very firmly to have an in-person appointment, and they most of the time will accommodate you. I've had this experience myself, and I've said I cannot do a meeting in a Zoom meeting. I need you to see my husband in person. And initially it was like, oh, well, we're not doing that. I said, no, you're my doctor. You're my husband's doctor. And I want an in-person appointment. And we have had an appointment since then. So I would say that's a real way of advocating for yourself and others in your family as well.
Thank you, Sally.
Sally, can I make a little comment to tack on to that? So as long as we have face masks, all of us are still in a disabled situation meeting with our doctors everywhere. So sometimes we can understand, sometimes we can't. So as a group, we have uncertainty that takes us every single day of our, that is involved with every single day of our lives. So you can have a healthcare appointment and you might be able to understand one person, but then the next person comes in to talk to you about something or take vitals or do something else, and you can't understand them. So I'm really encouraging people to ask for the accommodation, which is more than just in-person meetings, to make sure that you can understand.
Thank you, Anne. And on that note, I am going to bring this meeting to an end. Thank you all so much for being here. My hope is that chapter leaders that are here will take this information back to your chapters and use it to motivate your members to reach out to their legislators and get things passed that we need get passed. HLAA California will do our best to keep you apprised of what things might be moving through the legislature and to keep you going on this and support you with this. So on that note, thank you everybody for being here, and virtual committee, hang around for a minute. Bye, everybody.
Katie, do you want me to stick around?
No, it's okay, Lynn. Who was that? Was that Lynn?
No, this is Joe, the captioner.
Oh, no, I'll use automatic. Thank you, Joe.
And just by the way, I'm in Chicago, not Florida.
Sorry.
Your captions were fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the nice words. Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Katie, this is Diane. If you don't need me to stick around for the virtual meeting, that's fine. But please watch for an email later today because I have some questions for you.
Okay.
Okay.
We're just doing a debrief. You can hang around if you want.
Okay. Yeah,
I have activated automatic captions. I have a hair appointment at noon, so I can't hang long. I want to know
how for hair appointments.
How did it go, everybody? What do you think?
This is Diane. Just one comment is there were times when the slides were very big and I had it on side-by-side mode, and I still had a very tiny picture of Kevin that was, even with the way I can magnify my screen, even that his headshot was very small and it was hard to lip read. So I was wondering if there is a way to make those slides smaller so there is a better view of the speaker.
Yes, Diane, it's the lines between, and you drag it over and Kevin's head can become big.
Okay, I'll have to look for those lines because I couldn't see them, but that's probably just me.
Yeah, no, Diane, I'm happy to practice with you. And it would be great because, see, I'd be the host, so then you could see it. So contact me. I want to make sure you understand how to do that.
Okay, thank you.
He was difficult to lip read because his connection wasn't very good. There were times when it was great and sometimes when it wasn't. Any other comments about what's going on?
No,
Rich? Is Rich with us?
No.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have my hand raised.
Oh, it's so good to have you with us. How are you doing?
Well, I'm making progress every day. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I'm in week 3. But anyway, I want to know, when we were in the meeting, there was some person, I can't remember his name now, who kept making off-the-wall chat comments. And was this an interloper or how? And I don't really need to know the answer to that. But what I need to know is when we're running these meetings and we get something like that, is there some way to shut that off?
Rich, are you talking about the person called Matthew Rafat?
Yes, I am.
Matthew is still listening to our meeting right now. And I did email, Matthew had some legitimate questions, and I did message him and say, we probably wouldn't have time for his questions because they weren't hearing loss related. So I just wanted you to know that, but he is listening right now.
Well, I'm removing people.
So who's that up to? Is that up to the host then to do that?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Is it up to the host to police that type of thing? Thank you.
Yeah, but he didn't, he's gone now. He didn't really interfere with the meeting. He was just putting things in chat. And when I suggested that we're not going to have time for him, he was very polite about it. I don't think that it was disruptive.
That's true, but someday we might have somebody who is disruptive.
Yes. And if somebody was disruptive, we were prepared to remove them from the meeting. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one thing that we have talked about in our virtual committee meetings. Yes. Anybody else have any other feedback?
I just learned something that I wasn't paying attention to. So, at the end of our meetings, we always have people who tag on and don't get off. We should just remove them. I just removed 5 people.
Good. Sometimes it always seems rude to me, but you're right. You're right. And I debated whether I should even say virtual committee, hang on. But I wanted to be able to talk to you guys because I have to leave pretty soon. Any other feedback? Helen, Laura, Tim, were there any issues that we need to address next time? We're good?
Yeah.
Nancy, you did a great job with Q&A. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So I got a message in the chat, and I want to ask everybody for your assistance. Somebody said that my voice was quiet. So I'm hearing from people that I'm speaking much quieter because all of a sudden I have my implant and I hear. So if you notice
it is,
I'm
and
yes,
quieter and I need to speak louder, would you please let me know?
Yeah, you were fine. Sherry's microphone. Fine. Yeah, you were fine. Yeah, Sherry's microphone was really scratchy.
Yeah.
So that's a person that has normal hearing, and your voice is softer than it used to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
I noticed it too, but her voice is so clear, I can understand it. So
it was softer, but I could understand you.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a setting on your microphone where you can up the volume on input. I don't know, but I didn't have any trouble with you.
Any trouble?
Okay. And Laura's our other hearing person, so
yeah, I didn't have any problems.
Okay. Kevin Mullin was talking about how what did he call it? Just a minute. Where you change a bill. You add on to a bill.
Right.
So we have the AB, whatever it is.
Is it 435?
Hearing aids.
No.
I'm going to contact him to see if we can add on a T-coil portion to that bill, because everything else for that bill is exactly what we want for the T-coil bill.
Interesting.
Anne, you might want to contact Leslie Butchko, because Leslie and John have, with Ben Allen and Richard Bloom, have gotten the Architectural Board in California to agree to review his proposal, which is similar to what New Jersey and New York has done. So that's kind of in place, but you might want to talk to her, because it's about having it built into the building code.
I'm familiar with John's communication with the Architects Board.
Okay. So that should be happening this year.
The piece of that, though, is that the whole thing with telecoils, it's still, I mean, I personally think telecoils were much more important than locked hearing aids.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that the bill that John is working on is part of the 5-year cycle, not part of the 2-year cycle. So I think
with the Architects Board, right?
Correct, but it's part of, it went through the assembly, went through Ben Allen, who's a senator. Is Ben Allen a senator? I can't remember. But Leslie could bring you up to speed on that.
Can you send me those email addresses, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we can enable the setting that when people join, they're muted, because especially when people join, it's always going through to see who's not and muting them, because the little extraneous noises, take away that spotlight from the speaker.
Yes, and I'm remembering that it was just me, made a conscious decision way back in the beginning not to mute people when they entered, because people didn't know how to unmute themselves. But I think we're beyond that now. So as soon as we sign off, I'm going to go into settings and turn that back on again. Yes. Thank you, Laura. Good point. Do we have anything else?
Yes, it's Diane. Is there a board meeting next weekend?
Yes, there is. I have a notice I have to get out to you all.
Okay, I'm just curious because
On Sunday at noon, I believe.
yeah, okay, that's what I was going to email you about, but I have something to tack onto it, so you'll see me later.
Alrighty. Yeah.
Go enjoy your haircut.
Yeah. I need color. I need color. Okay, everybody. Bye.
Hey.
Bye, everyone.